Baldur's Gate 3 may have surprised the world with its intense focus on romance. But honestly, this should not have come as a shock. It was, after all, Baldur's Gate 2 and Neverwinter Nights that popularized the idea of romance subplots in Western RPGs in the first place. And yet neither one of those games was the first D&D video game with a romance subplot. No, the first romanceable NPC in a D&D video game was from a nearly forgotten gold box D&D game called Treasures of the Savage Frontier that came out in 1992. It was the first Dungeons & Dragons romance, and yet it was also the second last gold box game, a game positioned as the end of one era and the beginning of a new one. And yet, the reason that the game stands nearly forgotten was this pull between eras. It was the last gasp of an exhausted game series, and the new concepts that it introduced were a decade too early. What followed this game was not the BioWare era of party banter and romance subplots, but instead the era of 3D dungeon crawlers. Treasures was in fact so early to the romance subplot party that it was, as far as I can track, the second ever Western RPG with a romance plot, period. Of course, this kind of thing is nearly impossible to confirm, as I can't account for things like random 1987 text adventures made by a teenager in a Yugoslav basement. Tracking romance subplots is a bit like trying to definitively answer which shooter game definitively had the first reload animation. The rabbit hole is of course never ending, but as far as major games that made any sort of real splash goes, this does appear to be one of the two major Western games that helped pioneer romance in role-playing games. The general evolution and history of romantic subplots in video games is utterly fascinating as a subject, yet also utterly beyond the scope of this video. Instead, that subject will be explored in a companion essay to this video that I'm going to drop in about a week's time. Now, computerized versions of D&D started their journey with romantic subplots in 1992, but in tabletop, it's been there since day one. Back when the first fighter attempted to flirt with the first barmaid. Romance has always been part of the tabletop hobby. And whether or not it belongs at your table, you're still going to want your players getting attached to the NPCs you introduce to them. And a great way to accomplish this is to use Chepekku tokens to give your players a visual representation of the characters. Chepekku is D&D's greatest map-making team, and they've recently treated the community to a brand new service, tokens. They've put their art team to work creating hundreds of new tokens for your tabletop games, and they're only just getting started. They're dropping a full 15 tokens a week, and each one of those has multiple variations. Plus on top of that, each one of these variations is fully customizable, giving you a tremendous number of options to make your players fall in love with. See, okay, let me show you how this works. Let's take this here goblin token and let's turn him into a romanceable NPC. We'll start with the base template. I choose this one. He's got those come hither eyes. You know what? Honestly, I don't think any of these colors are romanceable, so I will pick a custom color. And just like that, he's blue, and that means he's ready for love. That knife though, that knife isn't gonna work, so let's give him this one instead. A come hither knife to match his come hither eyes. You can even randomize the character if your players have particularly eclectic tastes. Once we're done, it's an easy export, and your NPC is built and ready for virtual tabletops. Printer friendly too if you play at a physical table. And you can gain access to the entire back catalog and all of the new drops for as little as $4 a month. Hike on down to the link below to get yourself signed up to the greatest session prep tool I have ever used. Thanks again to Chepekku for sponsoring the video. Now, let's get back to the Savage Frontier. Necessity is the mother of invention, as they say, and Treasures of the Savage Frontier didn't invent romanceable companions in RPGs because things were, like, going well. Like I said, this was the second last gold box game. Now, what does that mean? Well, the Gold Box series is more or less where D&D video games became a real thing. There were a handful of early games prior to the Gold Box series. Dungeons & Dragons computer fantasy game, Cloudy Mountain, Treasure of Tarman. early experiments when video games were just pulling themselves up from the digital aether. But all of this coalesced into TSR, the original company that owned D&D, deciding to make a move to take D&D video games more seriously. Cloudy Mountain was cute and all, but the situation was kind of embarrassing. Series like Wizardry and Ultima were cranking out hit games, heavily based on and inspired by the mechanical style of Dungeons & Dragons. So why aren't actual D&D video games on a similar level? A decision was made to change the licensing strategy. They would pick a competent publisher and give them full video game rights to make games and to sublicense the IP further to developers. In this way, D&D video games could become a fully interconnected digital franchise in its own right, rather than random scattered games all over the place. You will note that this arrangement held true all the way from the late 80s until 2011. With differing eras as the D&D video game rights changed hands several times. But who exactly would be the studio to get those initial rights back in 1987? Who would be given the chance to make D&D the video game franchise it deserved to be? Many different publishers bid on the rights, most of them extremely qualified. Sierra, EA, even Origin. AKA the company that was making all of those Ultima games and embarrassing TSR with them. But, of course, none of those companies ended up receiving the rights. Instead, it was a company called SSI, Strategic Simulations Incorporated, that won the day. And there was a reason for that. It was their ties to tabletop. SSI was first and foremost a computer wargame company. They had ties to tabletop far over and above what other companies were offering, and they pledged to truly bring D&D to the desktop. Beyond that, their pitch was one of the only ones that truly had ambitions of using the D&D license to create a gaming franchise rather than a single game. Building off of systems that they pioneered with their past games, SSI got to work creating a series that truly and spiritually adapted those early editions of D&D into a proper CRPG format. Dungeons & Dragons Pools of Radiance released in February of 1988. It came on a unique engine and was shipped in a gold box. This game changed everything, putting D&D on par with the early CRPG legends like Ultima. SSI showed up with sequels and spin-offs on this engine, each of them packaged in a gold box. Hence why we call them the Gold Box games. These games were party-based with complex mechanics, great graphics, for the time, customizable characters, and even the ability to port those characters between games. It was a mind-blowing experience in 1988, easily equal to the peers it was attempting to match. And even better, this wasn't an approximation of D&D like those other game series. This was D&D. You could make the exact same character in both digital and pen and paper forms. The game sold 250,000 copies. In the late 80s, that's pretty much as big as it gets. This game was a wild success. But that was in 1988, and it didn't remain 1988 forever, did it? The late 80s and early 90s was basically the fastest that gaming technology has ever moved. Tech had like 2 or 3 years in the sun before it became painfully outdated. As early as 1989, they began work on their next engine for the Dark Sun games. Yet production on this ended up moving at kind of a snail's pace. The Gold Box system was designed around the Commodore 64 originally, a computer that had stood the test of time for much of the 80s. However, soon after the creation of the Gold Box, the Commodore would be going out of date. And revamping the entire engine for the new technology era ended up being a much tougher job than even making the engine in the first place. This new engine ended up being years away, and was already out of date by the time it finished. Pools of Radiance was released in 1988. Over those next 4 years, lacking a suitable engine upgrade, SSI would set forth an absolute fire hose of new Gold Box games. How many? 13. 14 if you count the fact that they released the dev tools in 1993 to fans who wanted to, make their own Gold Box games. They made a full mainline gold box series as sequel to Pools of Radiance, but there were also Buck Rogers games, an MMO, a truly insane Spelljammer game with terrible cosplays in place of graphics, and they even dropped a trilogy of Dragonlance games. Side note, I will be covering one of those Dragonlance games later this year. In preparation for that, I've begun a Dragonlance book club called It's Called a Lance. You can find a link to it down in the description. We're still early on, so I'd love to see you join us. Anyway, they spammed out 13 gold box games in 4 years. It was madness. In almost no time at all, the gold box had gone from a seal of quality and prestige to the sign that you should probably look elsewhere, cause, buddy, you have played this game before. Now, this is where we enter 1992. The 4th consecutive year of gold box spam. People are just tired. They are ready for something new. The final gold box titles begin rolling out. Despite the rapid pace and my language so far, these games aren't actual literal spam. There actually hasn't been any true decline in quality since the original Pool of Radiance. The gold box engine had been getting steady improvements, and in this final year, they started to dream big to find marketing points. Treasures of the Savage Frontier is the sequel to Gateway of the Savage Frontier. Why am I covering Treasures when I haven't covered Gateway yet? The answer is quite simple. My policy with the gold box games is to cut through the spam and really only cover individual gold box titles when they give me an interesting angle to tell you guys about. And in this case, Treasures of the Savage Frontier is worth a video based purely on the fact that it was slated to be nothing more than just one more smack upon a long-dead horse. And to try and avoid being just that, Treasures helped pioneer the concept of romanceable party members, a staple of the genre in the years to come, yet one that didn't quite catch on yet. Now, let's get into the game. So you can get to know Sulaya, D&D's first romanceable NPC. Now, let's get into it. Some setup is required before we hit start on the game. We're going to be wooing an NPC here, so we're going to need to be ready with our very best food. You can actually impress virtually anyone if you cook them a good meal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare an old family chicken recipe to impress Sulaya. The first step to making a good chicken breast is an equally good marinade. I keep mine pretty simple. Just a little salt, a little pepper, and then some nicotine patches to really get that smoky tobacco flavor. If you don't have that on hand though, my great-grandmother apparently used to use vape juice during wartime rationing, so really just use what you have. Let's pop that in the fridge for a few hours and let the meat really absorb those flavors. Next thing before we get the game running is to acknowledge that this game is a sequel. What happened in the first game? Well, the need to know here isn't so big. We're on the northern side of the Sword Coast, a portion of which is named the Savage Frontier. The Sword Coast cities and kingdoms are all fiercely independent duchies and city-states, but they're somewhat cohesively bound together in what's called the Lord's Alliance. It's not like a full alliance, they don't work together on most things, but they do work together against one singular enemy, the Zentarim. The Zentarim are a pretty asymmetric foe to take on. They're a powerful network of mercenaries, cultists, smugglers, assassins, all bound together into a singular dark guild. The Zentarim are hard to wipe out because they grow in the seedy underbelly of every single city on Faerun. The Black Network likes to make themselves indispensable to the corrupt authorities and nobles, in between rounds of attempting to take over the world. The first game, Gateway to the Savage Frontier, stars you as a band of caravan guards who get caught up in the Zentarim's latest plot. Their power waxes mightily. The time for scheming is no longer needed. They have raised armies to conquer the Lord's Alliance, and you must stop them. It all culminates in the Battle of Asgore, in which the players summon a host of monsters to tear the Zent legions to shreds. Game 2 begins several weeks later. The heroes of Asgore have spent weeks partying it up and enjoying their celebrity reputation. Another bright sunny day dawns, until they are unexpectedly teleported into an old stone building. Amanitas, a wizard and powerful ally from the first game, has summoned us here against our will. This is the dwarven town of Lork, and it's still under Zent control. Amanitas has decided that we're the best ones to help free it from the Zentarim remnants. We're to free the town and then storm the keep to defeat the Zent Lord Gaeldar. Afterwards, we're supposed to meet him in the town of Secomer, as he needs our help with some of these strange happenings on the coast here. The first thing you'll generally notice when you start this map, if you haven't played a gold box game before, is... what the fuck is this?! I haven't bounced off a game so hard since the first time I picked up the old Ravenloft dungeon crawlers. These games are so old that very little of your existing knowledge and fluency in gaming is going to help you very much. It once again feels like you're a 6-year-old picking up the controller for the first time. Fortunately, this effect actually doesn't last too long. The gold box games aren't like English, they're like Old English. At first it looks completely impenetrable, but once you start looking hard at it, you'll find a lot of the stuff that you're used to. It just looks and plays a bit different. In fact, it's quite surprising how much of the modern CRPG genre was already in place this far back in time. Going from the gold box games to games like Baldur's Gate 3 or Wrath of the Righteous, you start to realize that a lot of the progress that has been made in the vast gulf of 30 years was not a matter of adding content or features, it's been a matter of intense bottom-up streamlining. Most features you expect to see in a modern CRPG are actually here. They can just be difficult to find and access. That said, I can see why people were getting tired of the gold box formula after 4 years of dealing with this interface. The Steam version of Treasures of the Savage Frontier, which is the version I'm playing, comes with an optional fan tool called the Gold Box Companion. It adds a bunch of quality of life features that are lovely to have, such as the ability to heal yourself in one button in camp, instead of spending like a half hour manually spamming Cure Light Wounds over and over. It also adds an auto mapper, since in the original you would need to hand draw your own map, probably on some grid paper. Although the companion adds some quality of life to this, there is still plenty of jank to experience. Such as the fact that your adventurers start the game without any of their spells memorized and all of their gear unequipped. It was quite the surprise to get absolutely curb-stomped in the first encounter when characters showed up to battle empty-handed and naked. I slowly clear out Lork as I get a handle on the mechanics. Thankfully, the local dwarves are rising up and will back me in combat as I learn the ropes. Once we've got the streets clear, the soldiers in the keep are forced to spread out to maintain order, and we can thus force our way inside. Down in the depths of the dungeon, we find our first encounter with a romanceable NPC, Solaya, the golden-haired prisoner. An evil sorceress named Cortara seeks to use her as her escape plan from the party, disguising herself with magic to look the exact same as her captive. Nice magic spell. Would be a shame if someone detected magic. We destroy this evil enchantress and save the real Solaya. In order to recruit her, you have to have your romance candidate at the head of the party. It has to be a guy, they have to be lawful good, they've got to be fast, they've got to be strong, and they've got to be fresh from the fight. In this case, I put together this handsome pixel bachelor named Thurincroy. I figure he should be what Solaya is looking for. And just to make absolutely certain about this, to help Thurincroy out, let's keep working on the nicotine chicken. Should be done marinating right now. Now we gotta cook the SOB. Nobody likes dry chicken, and that's why we're going to boil it in water. It can't be dry if we cook it in water. That's cooking 101. The nicotine patches are supposed to come off here, but they're transparent, so they can be a little bit hard to find. So I just leave them on. I don't think they can hurt you. It gives that smoky tobacco flavor. I'm gonna get this thing going. It'll be ready for our prospective lovebird soon. Now, let's get back to the game. Solaya is the daughter of some sort of forest man, perhaps a ranger or a druid in a distant woodland. She was kidnapped in the aftermath of the Battle of Ascor, and only the evil sorceress's interest in Solaya's father kept her alive. Our freshly recruited friend joins the party and smiles at Thurincroy. Continuing the dungeon, we find Jabarkus, the other love interest. He helps us defeat Lord Gaeldar, and then he goes on his way since we already recruited Solaya. The town of Lork is now free from the Zentarim, so we're free to hit the road and find Amanitas in Secomer. We find ourselves upon a world map that has clearly had a lot of love poured into it. This is one of the things that D&D has lost over the years. Once upon a time, D&D and CRPGs in general were obsessed with cartography. In retrospect, although I'm thankful for the quality of life stuff that the Gold Box Companion gave me, I kind of wish I didn't have access to the auto-mapper. Drawing things out on grid paper feels much more in the spirit of these games. Old CRPGs like this had this lovely tactile element that has been utterly erased with the years. You were expected to play with a notepad and the game manual beside you. Treasures and the other Gold Box games even came with a journal full of all the various conversations you have with NPCs. The Gold Box wanted your digital journey to still be intercut with literally physically holding paper in your hands and staining your fingers with ink as you mapped the dungeon. While it was certainly inevitable that this aspect would be streamlined out with the passage of time, it's still somewhat sobering to see this piece of the genre's soul chipped away and forgotten. We take part in a handful of adventures on the way to meet our wizard friend. There is still an undercurrent of illicit Zentarum activity everywhere we travel. Humbled the Black Network might be, but not defeated. We start finding lucky papers on the Zentarum that are written in cipher. We need to slowly collect the translation crystals over the course of the game from Zent operatives in order to make sense of what the enemy is planning. We reach Sycomer and Amanitas gives us our next task. The Lord's Alliance is planning a major diplomatic mission to Waterdeep in order to decide their plan to deal with the Zent remnants, as well as the scattered rumors of war in the north. Apparently, the port city of Luskan has been mustering forces towards the Alliance's borders. We are to go to the town of Leyland and meet the diplomats at the inn and personally escort them the rest of the way to Waterdeep. He also hands us a letter to deliver to the Lords of Waterdeep ourselves, as well as an enchanted crown of yapping so that we can put it on in camp and then he can yap at us anytime we want about what our next quest is. We reach Leyland before the diplomats, and the other guards invite us for a drink while we wait. This turns out to be a trick though, and we find ourselves drugged and imprisoned by the Zentarum agents. They aren't good enough kidnappers though, and they just dump us with all our gear in a locked room, and laugh as we scream our heroic hearts out. I do what any reasonable person would do, and I set the room I'm trapped in on fire. And it works. We're out. And the kidnappers are dead. Idiots. We rush to Waterdeep, hoping to find out if the diplomats arrived safely. We're stopped by one of the lords at the gate, and we give him the letter from Amanitas, and we quickly realize the Zent's trap. Those kidnappers who grabbed us, they were never actually meant to keep us contained. They were meant to swap out the wizard's letter with another one that suited their interests. They basically swap out the wizard's warning about the Zentarum with a letter that says, the heroes of Ascor are working for the Zent. I can't believe it. We've had our reputation destroyed by a damn kick-me note. We're seized by the authorities and sent out to a ship where we are tied up and hurled to the sea. A drowned death apparently being customary for traitors. Fortunately, a passing group of merfolk rescue the party from our fates and drag us back to land to try to salvage the situation. The scope of the situation becomes clear as we adventure further. The Zent's army fell, but their assault on the Sword Coast remains a go. The open marching of armies was never the real strength of the Zentarum anyway. They now make their moves through the Black Network. The Lord's Alliance has been turned against the heroes of Ascor, and further sabotage within the Alliance wreaks havoc. Luskan seizes islands off the coast, wearing the colors of Waterdeep, attacking towns in false flag attacks. They coup settlements, kidnap lords, pit allies against each other. And the only ones who can put things back together again is us, and we're on the run from the law. From here out, the game is mostly a bunch of disconnected side adventures. You go from town to town, wherever the wizard says, and thwart the Zentarum's various schemes and restore order to the Alliance. Throughout these various adventures, the story with Thurincroy and Celaya progresses. Now keep in mind, we actually aren't Thurincroy. He's not our POV character, he's just a party member. Thus, the romance happens with a pretty surprising amount of distance. We mostly see the progressing romance from across the campfire, with the rest of the party making comments on what they're seeing. Oh, those two are talking a lot. Thorencroy seems to be smiling quite a bit, doesn't he? Oh, does it look like they're cuddling over there? Now, what choices need to be made in order to keep this romance going? Well, most of it was actually done at character creation. Lawful good, male, melee fighter. But there is one more thing that we do have to do over the course of the adventure. To impress Celaya, Thorencroy must always be valiant and get himself into the melee rather than hanging back. Sounds easy, doesn't it? Well, it's not. The game is very, very sensitive about this. Your guy got stuck on some terrain or blocked by allies and needs to use his bow one battle? Well, Celaya has caught the ick and she's breaking up with you. Think it's tactically better to let the enemy come to you this battle? Well, she's caught the ick. Oh, your guy is too beat up this battle and will die if he charges? Well, I mean, you don't want Blondie to catch the ick, do you? It's actually really bad mechanically, because you start to get more and more upset with her every time she forces you to reload to please her. Your guy has gone through so much by the time the romance is finally ready to progress. Fortunately, Thorencroy powers through, and Celaya is almost won over. Let's get that chicken finished to seal the deal. Now, as you can see, boiled chicken doesn't look too nice visually. It's certainly plenty moist internally, and it has that incredible smoky tobacco flavor, but we've got to make it look a little bit better visually. You could barbecue it to get some color on there, but if you're like me and you don't have a barbecue, you can actually take some of your Warhammer paints and brush on some grill marks. Nobody's gonna know the difference. And with the nicotine chicken delivered, Celaya is successfully wooed. The conclusion is that the two lovers approach the party in camp and announce that they're an item now. They ask that they be accepted as a couple and swear that this won't get in the way of the mission. And you can choose to just say no and kick Celaya out, which is very funny, but it's also a bad idea because it will, permanently nerf your other character. Mechanically, once they're together, your bachelor no longer needs to berserker charge. Everything's already locked in. I can actually use strategy now, thank you. The two lovers gain some form of bonus, and what that isn't quite clear. And if one of them dies or leaves the party, the other one will be permanently debuffed. They'll also go into a frenzy if the other lover gets knocked unconscious. And that's it. That's the conclusion of D&D's first romance plot. Doesn't really come up for the rest of the game. So by this time we're pushing endgame. All the various plots are revealed and thwarted. The Lord's Alliance is once again seeing things clearly enough to host a conclave to decide what to do about Waterdeep attacking their neighbors. The heroes of Asgore arrive, deliver all the evidence that they have that it was all the Zhentarim all along, and that Waterdeep hasn't attacked anyone. It's all been Luskan troops in disguise. Everyone is quite thankful, and they start making moves to handle this situation. But for the heroes of Asgore, a much harder mission is given. The Lord's Alliance is still tender. They require a war chest and a powerful symbol to smooth over all the bad blood. We're sent to the north to retake an ancient red gem and the vast treasuries of the legendary dragon, Freezefire. The game really starts to feel good at this section. The objective is clear, and we gear up for the expedition to the frozen north. We follow a trail of massacred dwarves as we go. The Zhentarim's network discovered our plans, and they got here before us. We fight our way through towards the distant frozen peak. On the way, the Zhent expedition has gotten desperate. One in particular is in utter despair at the torture he'll be subjected to if he fails to defeat us. At the apex of the mountain, we square off against the best of the Zhent forces on the Sword Coast. It's not an easy battle by any means, but with carefully hoarded stockpiles of scrolls and fireballs at my disposal, we're just barely able to come out on top. The gem is in sight, held in the claw of Freezefire, mummified in the glacier. That doesn't last long though, because as one would expect for a final boss, taking her gem wakes her back up. And we must now slay a mummified white dragon. It's surprisingly easy. Fireball is a good spell, and I sure can cast it a lot. We get a nice little aftermath sequence. The heroes of Asgore are freshly redubbed the Heroes of the North. The gem is used to rally the cause, and Luskan withdraws its forces. In D&D canon, it's supposed to be kind of mysterious whether Luskan is under Zhent control or not. But we definitively know from this game that it is. Or at least that it was at this time period. The troubles still don't feel quite over yet, though, nor are all of the plot threads wrapped up. In particular, it's hinted several times during the story that Celia's father was more important than she knows. It's sequel bait, which was honestly really dumb of SSI. The writing was on the wall here, the gold box was over, there was obviously never going to be a third Savage Coast game. And so, we will never know what was so important about the Ranger's daughter. The romance mechanics were ultimately destined to be forgotten, until being somewhat vindicated with Baldur's Gate 2 a decade later. The systems they introduced here weren't incredible, but very few of these early experiments with romance in RPGs were. I hope you've enjoyed the video today. Please remember to leave a like on it if you made it this far. And remember to subscribe and stay tuned if you want to see the companion essay about the history of romance in RPGs. Thank you so much for watching, and holy shit, I'm begging you, don't actually eat the nicotine chicken recipe. I know it's tempting for that smoky tobacco flavor.